guys. So in line with my horrible use of knowing how to use technology, I've already filmed this video once, but I'm going to do it again because it didn't upload properly, so I apologize if it's coming out on Thursday, but it'll still give you lots of time to kind of work with this concept of this idea of a poetry walk. I didn't mean to leave you guys for so long with it on your own, and I do want to give you a bit of a walkthrough about, what is this poetry color walk supposed to be? What am I expecting out of it? And the answer really is just to kind of have fun. I want to open your eyes to a little bit of poetry. I know that in English class, we analyze poetry a lot, and it can be a little bit daunting or a little bit scary sometimes to be asked to write your own poetry, because I know in English class, again, there's not usually a lot of time to delve into really writing lots of varieties of different types of poetry. So this is just a fun way to kind of basically to brainstorm, to show you that, there's not one way to write a poem. Poetry should really be kind of a way to express your ideas and your thoughts, and sometimes it can be tricky to get started, so think of this as a way to kind of just play around with poetry in a different way, and to kind of open your eyes to looking at what's around you, really, because that's what poetry is all about, is to kind of see, to see what you see, to go around and kind of look at what's around you. So for this poetry walk, and the reason I'm kind of doodling a camera right here, is you're going to take a camera, and your camera probably doesn't look a lot like this anymore, but you're going to take your camera, is the easiest way that I found to do it, and you're going to go out for a walk. Now, this can be a walk anywhere. This could be a walk around your house. This could be a walk around outside. So find a place that you're comfortable, go for a walk, make sure that you maintain your social distancing. So we're talking about 6 feet apart from someone else. So, make sure that you're not close to anyone, but go for a walk somewhere. Now, I heavily suggest the use of a camera. If you do not have a camera with you, that's totally fine. Grab a piece of paper and a pencil. Make sure it's a somewhat nice day. It'll make it a little bit easier because you'll have to sit outside and write, or you'll have to kind of go around your house and write at the same time. Whereas I find if you can go out and sort of take a lot of photos, and then you can come back and take a look at your photos to be a tad bit easier, but choose the one that, works for you. So you're either going to have a camera or a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper, and then you're going to choose where to walk. You're going to either pick outside or inside. So that's your choice right now. Okay? And then I'll walk you through what I did, and then hopefully that'll help kind of start turning those gears in your mind for sort of what you want to do for or how you want to approach this. Now, please keep in mind this is only one way of doing it. If there's a way that you found that has worked already and is different than my way, that's fine. I am so excited. You guys make such interesting poems. I've really enjoyed reading them. There's such a variety in different types. It's really enjoyable to go through. So if you're not doing it my way, that's 100% fine. This is a video more for those who are stuck on how to get started, or who would like to see an example of one way of doing it, so that you can kind of follow along. So if you've already done this, don't worry about watching this video unless you're curious. But if you're stuck, follow along and I'll show you what I did. So first off, I didn't have a chance to go outside today yet. So what I did actually is I went back into my photos, into, Google Photos, and I looked back at the history of my photos, and I tend to, when I go for walks, I take a lot of photos anyways, so I grabbed a bunch of photos from a photo walk that I've already done. So, if you're someone who has gone out and taken a lot of photos of places around St. John, you can go back and kind of grab those photos. Now, the thing that you're looking for is you're looking for focusing on one color. I'm using the Canadian spelling. Yay! So you're looking for one color. So it could be, focus on the idea of red or blue or what have you. Now the color walk that I chose, or the hike that I chose to do my color walk. I did it in the winter, which means that, I focused on the color white. Okay, so that's just the one that I grabbed. So I went through all my photos, and all the photos that had a lot of white in it, I grabbed. And then I put them into a PowerPoint, which that's what this is. I originally filmed this on PowerPoint, but the filming for some reason didn't take, so I've had to move it. But you can create a PowerPoint too, if that helps, and kind of go into the same format. So I think I've done enough of a bit of an introduction. Let's take a look at exactly kind of what I did. So, the first thing you're going to look at, now that we're out of here, let's do green. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is this idea of figurative language. So we've been going over kind of what figurative language is. Now, for the purposes of this video, I try to use a lot of different types of figurative language in order to help build my poem. And the more that you can use these tools of figurative language, the stronger that your poem will be. I've been seeing some really great poems coming out, but some of them, if you infuse a little bit more of this figurative language into your poetry, would create a much stronger image, much stronger wording, and it would just be a stronger poem overall. So you guys have had a great start in terms of, trying to use a poetic structure by, using your lines, grouping things into stanzas, which are your little poetry paragraphs, right? So you have stanza 1, stanza 2, then you go off and you do stanza 3. So I like that you guys are starting to mimic this kind of poetic structure. I know that we did a couple of poems that had a little bit of structure in them, and you've had some options to work with a little bit of structure. But mostly I've been keeping you guys kind of loosey-goosey, not a lot of structure. So I'm happy that you guys are kind of starting to mimic that poetic structure in there. And the next thing that I want you guys to do is to really focus in on this idea of figurative language. Now, figurative language is something that we've been doing a little bit in the weekly lessons. So I think we've gone over personification. I can't remember if we've done in that one chart where I asked you guys to look at the poem and you had to, or the picture, sorry, and you had to write all that descriptive, kind of those descriptive phrases and clauses that I asked for of you guys. That was an option. In that, we went over a bunch of figurative language. I think we did a metaphor. I think we did onomatopoeia, maybe. I think we did like some nice imagery work. So we're going to be looking at figurative language and just other fun stuff. It doesn't technically fall underneath figurative language, but all of this kind of other fun stuff really helps to enhance your poems. So the way that I'm doing this is I'm focusing on one type of figurative language or fun thing, because it's not all figurative language, but or kind of fun thing, and then I'm trying to build a line using that kind of device to help me out. Okay, so let me show you an example. So the first one that I want to focus in on is this idea of a metaphor. Now, this should be a nice quick review for you guys. Metaphors, I know, are covered extensively in English class. So when you look at a metaphor, you make use of a statement that doesn't literally make sense. For example, time is a thief. Time is not actually a thief, it's not a person, but this idea conveys or expresses the idea that hours or days sometimes seem to slip by without you noticing, right? So it kind of is a phrase that will help the reader to understand that there's more meaning to your words than what you're simply writing. In English class, a lot of times we tell you, there's meaning in this text, there's meaning in this book, there's meaning here, and a lot of the times it can be, sure, did the author really mean that much? When I write, I don't put that much meaning in. Well, I'm asking you to put that meaning in right now, right? I want you to have kind of a deeper meaning that you're not telling the audience up front, but you're telling them in a way by using kind of this figurative language. So some examples here is the world is my oyster, you're a couch potato, time is money. So these are some really good kind of metaphors. They're sort of cliche metaphors, but they work. They're totally fine. So, start with a couple of these. Keeping in mind that, metaphors only make sense when the similarities between the two things being compared are apparent, or the readers understand as a connection between the two words. So you cannot say, time is a big toe. I wouldn't even understand what that means unless you're kind of explaining your metaphor a little bit more. But a good way, if you're not too sure about metaphors, is just go to Google and look up a list of commonly used metaphors. And when you Google this, you're going to get a nice big list. Now, if you take one from that website, that is totally fine, but keep in mind that it should align with the picture or the object that you're talking about, and your entire poem should not come from one website. Okay, if your entire poem is coming from one website, then we're getting into, we're getting into plagiarism, we're getting into academic dishonesty, so I'm not expecting your entire poem to be from one website. But if you're grabbing, for example, the world is my oyster from a list of commonly used metaphors, I'm okay with that. That's totally fine for this purpose because you're going to be building your poem around your pictures. So, if you need a little bit of help by Googling some metaphors, especially if English isn't your first language and you're one of my English language learners, sometimes looking up a list of metaphors can be helpful for kind of understanding which ones would be understood in English. Because I know that you might have some sayings, that exist in your language. I think someone was telling me a story about Arabic, and there's a lot of metaphors concerning the sky and stars that when translated over don't make sense in English. So if you're one of my English language learners, feel free to use Google for kind of common English metaphors to borrow, and that's totally fine. So, jumping back into the idea of a metaphor is we're having, a comparison between two things. Okay, so if I go back down this way and I'm going to take a look at my first photo. Okay, so if I'm looking at my photo and I'm trying to see the white, I see a couple of things in this photo already. I see these kind of barricades, right? These kind of safety bumpers along the side of the road. These snowbanks. Okay, so I see some snowbanks. I see some clouds, right? This one's kind of like a straight across wispy, not wispy, it's like a straight across, kind of shooting almost like an arrow maybe. We have some nice big fluffy cotton candy like ones. So I have some white there, and I have some big heavy snow kind of right here on the trees. Okay, so I have lots of white. Now, again, we're talking about this idea of the metaphor and keeping in the idea that I want to try to invoke the white color as much as I can when I'm sort of going through this color walk. And the color walk is meant to inspire you, right? So let's kind of see organically where this comes from. Keep in mind, I've done this once in the video before. I don't remember anything that I've written. So you're kind of seeing what my thinking process is while I go through this. So I want to introduce the idea that we are driving into our white wonderland. This is the car right here. Because this should also tell a little bit of a story while I'm kind of doing my color walk. So I could say, and keep in mind, again, loosey-goosey structure. We're not getting too much into the finer parts of poetic structure, unless that's something that you're interested in. But for the purposes of today's video, I'm not going to go too much into poetic structure. So I could say driving into Fundy National Park. That's where we are. The snow. I kind of want to do something like the snow the snow, it starts small and it guides, right? Because if you somebody who's driving, and if you've started driving and you know winter driving, these kind of like bumpers on the side of the road are sort of helpful for you to stay on the road if something happens. You know, they're sort of like a nice little soft, cushy landing spot sometimes, and they'll help you kind of stay on the road, especially when it's really icy. So the snow. Driving into Funny National Park, the snow guides. Metaphor. Okay. And again, this is my thinking process. Snowbanks. The snowbanks are like guards. And the guards stand tall. I kind of want to focus in on the snowbanks for this one. Okay. Let me restart. Sorry. The gleaming white guards point or silently, a little bit of personification here too, silently point us in the direction of our winter wonderland. All right, not the most beautiful metaphor I've ever written. And again, you're obviously going to spend a little bit more time making sure that you kind of have maybe a couple options here. But, you know, I don't really like this metaphor that much. Okay, let me try to see if I can make this a little bit better. The snow banks gleam. The snow banks. Ooh. I can make this better. You know, I'm going to pause the video here and try to think of a good metaphor. Hang on. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, that took me just a little bit of time. I tend to think in some similes a little bit easier. Okay, so the snow banks are standing guards pointing our maybe I kind of want to keep invoking this sort of winter wonderland sort of imagery kind of thing. Pointing our noble steed towards the winter wonderland. Okay, so two kind of semi-interesting metaphors going on here. I apologize. See, it should take you a little bit of time. I had to sit down and kind of scribble some things out. And I didn't want to make you guys kind of look at all the errors that I'm going through, but you can see sort of how, you know, maybe I have this kind of the guards here, the snow is the guards pointing us in a direction, or the snowbanks are standing guards pointing, the kind of same idea, but you sort of get the idea of what I'm looking for, and so, you know, maybe I might add a line or two before or after, but we have a nice metaphor sitting in there. And if you like this sort of format of having the photo and then your poetry line, you can feel free to do that and submit it that way. Okay, next one I'm going to go on to is a simile. Again, like I said, I think in simile is a little bit easier. It compares two things. We use the like or as. Very basic description of what a simile is, but it will work. Busy as a bee, clean as a whistle, brave as a lion. Again, feel free to Google list of common similes. That's totally fine, right? You're gonna use it to kind of help get some inspiration. There are a bunch here, so you can feel free to pause the video and take a look. So I'm starting off with this idea. I kind of like this one right here. The snowbanks are standing guards, pointing our noble steed towards the winter wonderland. Okay, here's our winter wonderland. As we enter, because we're continuing the story, as we enter the, as we enter, nope, I don't like enter. As we break trail, finding our way, the snow crunches underfoot like thousands of tiny diamonds being crushed. Okay, again, this is sort of just me spitballing and making up some ideas. I'm going to try to go a little bit quicker, but you know, we have the noble steed carrying us on our way as we break trail. You know, we talk about this kind of crunchy snow, you know, and I can kind of invoke that idea. Continuing on, personification. Personification gives human characteristics to inanimate objects, animals, or ideas. It's, you know, a lot of fun. So you're giving something that is not a thing, a human-like characteristic. Think back to last week when we had that sort of lesson about how, you know, your hair, we treat it like a human. We treat it like it has, like it's an athlete. We treat it like it needs to eat. We treat it like, you know, it's something that is a human within itself, when really it's dead protein, I think. So we treat a thing like a human. So a couple of examples here. Opportunity knocked at his door. Opportunity is an idea. It cannot knock, right? Just like friendliness is an idea. You know, cruelty is an idea. Economics is an idea. So an idea can't do things that a human can do. The sun greeted me this morning. The sun is not a person. It cannot greet. It cannot say hello. It cannot speak. So you're going to try to give that kind of human-like quality to something that is non-human. So my non-human thing is going to be the snow. Oh, this one. Okay. So, you know, the trail that we're on in Funny National Park, if you've ever been. If you haven't, you should go. It's beautiful. I'm going to talk about this gate right here. And I'm going to give that gate a human-like characteristic. So I could say, the gate greeted us with promises of adventure that lay beyond. Alright, so we have our personification in there. You'll notice how, you know, yes, I'm going on the white color walk, and I'm trying to create this kind of winter wonderland white idea, but, you know, not every sentence has to be exactly about the color. So I could say the snow, the heavy snow-laden gate in there. So I'm kind of getting that idea of the snow again. And when I mean heavy snow laden, I mean that it's just there's a lot of snow on the gate itself. Now it's green snow. That's kind of cool. There's a lot. So to be laden means to be weighed down, right? So there's a lot of snow pushing down on the gate. So there we go. There's my personification. Onwards. Hyperbole is another common one that we looked at, and I just took the most common uses of figurative language and some other fun topics to use. So hyperbole, don't feel like you need to use these, but you can. Hyperbole is an outrageous exaggeration that emphasizes a point. It tends towards ridiculous or funny. You snore louder than a freight train. I had to walk 15 miles to school in the snow, uphill in bare feet. You could have knocked me over with a feather. Things that can't really happen, right? Like, if you imagine standing there and someone comes up and they have a tiny little feather. That's a feather. It looks more like a flame. It's hard to knock you over with it, right? It's going to be quite light. Or if you say, I had a 1,000-hour nap. If you did, you would be in a coma. You would have to have lots of doctors looking after you. Most people sleep for, the most I've heard a normal sleeper go is maybe like 13 to 15 hours when you're young. Beyond that, 1,000 is a lot. So we're exaggerating, right? I had a 1,000-hour nap. Probably not. We're getting into the idea of hyperbole. So I want to exaggerate this. I want to make it, comical. So in order to exaggerate, my eye gets drawn to the snow and the trees. So I could say, the snow on the trees caused them to bend and bow in our presence. Sure, why not? They're not actually bowing. They're not bending. They're not touching the floor. Or you could say the snow was so heavy. It was so heavy on the trees that it weighed 1,000 pounds. Or at this point we were snowshoeing, which is, if you've never been snowshoeing, they're like these special shoes that you wear in the snow, and they help you walk in really deep snow. So I could say the snow weighed 1,000. That's not how you spell 1,000. Sorry, it's hard to talk and write at the same time. 1,000 pounds on each snowshoe. Okay, so I have 3 examples, kind of in varying degrees of greatness, and obviously you'll make up a couple and kind of see, which one you like. All right, moving on. Symbolism. So when symbolism occurs when a word has its own meaning, but it's used to represent something indifferent. American flag means patriotism. Usually kind of any sort of flag will represent a love of a country. Red rose to symbolize love. Apple pie means American lifestyle. So again, if you're not used to the English language, it's not your first language, I would suggest to Google a list of symbols to help you out. Now, my common one in this white walk that I'm going on was the snow. Keep in mind that if I were to have chosen a different color, and if I were to go on a city walk, this would be a very different color walk because I would have multiple objects. I might have red glasses, I might have a red apple, and then I might have a red. So, you can kind of try to maybe keep one image across all of the colors, like I did with the snow, or if you want to change it up and talk about the color red, and then just take a picture of a lot of different red things. There's a lot of ways that you can do this. So this is just one way. So when I'm looking at this idea of snow and symbolism, usually it means purity. It means, something that is innocent. So I'm going to try to invoke that idea of innocence and purity. So what's my photo? Here we go. An interesting one. I put these in a random order. So I don't really think too much about them and which type of figurative language I would use or what kind of device I would use. So, you can always rearrange your photos, but I'm kind of locked in right now, so let's keep going. I could say, the, as we walked, the snow washed away all my sins to create a pure or to draw me back to nature. Alright, not the best use of symbolism, but there we go. I kind of have that idea of purity and the snow's innocence kind of washing over me to excuse I use sins. I just invoke that idea kind of almost biblically of baptism in order to wash away so that I can become innocent. Play around with it. If I had more time, I would probably change that line quite a bit, but it's not a bad line. It's not horrible. Continuing on. Alliteration. It is a sound device, so this is kind of getting into sort of our fun stuff. It's the repetition of the first consonant sounds in several words. So if I take a look at this, the first example here, we're up, wide-eyed, wondering while we wait for others to awaken. So we're up, wide-eyed and wondering while we wait for others to awaken. You'll see that w sound a lot. Second example here, Betty bought butter, but the butter was bitter, so Betty bought better butter to make the bitter butter better. Try saying that 10 times. So yeah, tongue twisters will frequently use alliteration to try to kind of trick your tongue a lot. But Betty bought butter, but the butter was bitter, so Betty bought better butter to make the bitter butter better. There, right? So same idea, let's try to make a sentence using alliteration. Okay, so I have trees, white, alliteration, when we were at the end of the white path, we waited for whether we would continue or go home. Alright, so I have the w sound in there a lot, invoking that white. Didn't actually use the word white, so maybe I'll go back and kind of change that, but you'll see sort of that alliteration going on, especially with the trees and the white, and that's what I came up with. So my suggestion is focus in on a sound and see how many words you can make with that sound and see how many you can fit into a sentence that would make sense. Next one, onomatopoeia. It is a sound device where the words sound like their meaning or mimic the sounds. Again, if English is not your first language, I would Google a list, and then you can kind of pick from the list of onomatopoeia sounds. But there's also here a couple: croak, caw, buzz, whir, swish, hum, quack, meow, oink, tweet. Okay, so the words sound like the sounds that they're trying to make, right? When you say hum, you actually have to hum, like hum, right? So you're going to try to invoke that in your writing. So I think that's my last one. This is my last one. So I'd say, Ooh, okay. A silence. Word within me. At the sight of our thrones stuck in the snow. Okay, again, not the most beautiful poem, but by the end of it, I made a poem. A poem that tells a little bit of a story of castles and steeds and guards, and I'm kind of evoking those images. So if I go through and kind of make my poem, let's use yellow. Let's make yellow nice and big. Perfect. So I would just write all these sentences out together. Or again, you can do that kind of PowerPoint. But say this is my poem. So the snowbanks are standing guards pointing our noble steed towards the winter wonderland. As we break trail, finding our way, the snow crunches underfoot like thousands of tiny diamonds being crushed. The heavy, snow-laden gate greeted us with promises of adventure that lay beyond. The snow weighed 1,000 pounds on each snowshoe. As we walked, the snow washed away all my sins to draw me back to nature. When we were at the end of the white path, we waited for whether we could continue or go home. A silence whirred within me at the sight of our thrones stuck in the snow. Okay? Bam, my poem. So, I hope this kind of helped you determine a little bit about what I'm looking for, and to show you that your poem does not need to be perfect in any way, sense, or form. I might have played around with that a little bit, added in a couple of lines here or there, maybe made it a little bit more adventurous, but, I would just write that whole thing out. And then, like I said, you could add the pictures in if you've taken pictures, if you're comfortable with having them in there. That's up to you. I would love to see your photos along with your poem. That would be really neat, but you don't have to. And in that whole thing, I was kind of focusing on that sort of color white. And maybe when I went back, I might try to add in white a little bit more to my poem. But at the end of the day, you know what? It's meant to let you have fun and let you explore a different way of writing poetry. It's meant to help inspire some ideas. So I hope you have fun with this. Really, that's the big takeaway. Tell me a story. Tell me a story about what you see, about a color, about an object with the color that you're following, like a tree, a green tree, or white snow, the blue lake. Have fun with it. All right, I'm looking forward to see what you guys come up with. And like I said, all I'm looking for is that you are trying this out. Even if you don't find it to be the most successful poem you've ever written, but I want to see that you try. All right, see you guys. Bye.